Today is December 19th, 2014, and I am going to talk about the government rape that occurred by George Bechtold, and two different times, and in particular the first time, and try to explain how it was connected to what the United States government and what his entire family had participated in assaulting me for years when I was a little girl, and some of the different techniques and tactics they used. And I already explained what some of the government different schemes were. For example, it's sort of a weird way to put things, to say, the government organized how I could be raped from a sitting position, or seated position, as I said, or lying down, or standing, various circumstances. And it just sounds sort of random, but hopefully when I explain how many times they use the same specific triggers for each situation, it goes to show that they were planning to rape me in a number of situations. And in every situation, they wanted the rapist to get away with looking like he hadn't done anything wrong. And and I can't overestimate or exaggerate at all how many times this was done to me repeatedly when I was little, and for how many years. So this was really there's hardly any way to describe how frequent and constant their attempts to instill fear in me was, and for how long the period. I mean, from age 2 to that I can remember, although I believe it goes back even further, because I remember being molested as a baby. But being able to connect specific things they did with trying to scare me and that kind of thing, I'm able to connect more of that from around age 2 and forward. But and actually, that's not to say that they didn't try some of that when I was a baby, because I do remember, if I tried to move my head to the side or anything as a baby even, I'd get punished by being hurt. So they were at a very early time trying to instill ideas in me of this is how it is, you accept this, or bad things will happen to you. So when they try to condition you that long, for that length of period, it wasn't even really conditioning, because in a sense it seems like conditioning, or grooming, quote unquote, whatever this word grooming is, because I really haven't been around a ton of sexual assault victims who are little kids, and I don't exactly know how this term grooming comes into play, and the scope of it and what it means exactly. But grooming and conditioning sound so mild to use as terms, when threats of death, being murdered, and use of weapons and torture were constantly being used in my situation, which probably with some of these grooming, quote unquote, situations that also happened. But it's not exactly like, well, we all just went along with it, and I became conditioned to like it, as if it was some sort of a cultural or socio-cultural alternative lifestyle, that anybody could accept from a possibly different kind of social background or cultural background. I mean, this was torture against me, and intimidation and threats, and they would sometimes mix it up and try to play games and make games out of it when I was littler, and sometimes when they thought that that I wasn't, fighting it or whatever, or didn't think it was bad. So they did incorporate games and attempts to do bonding and that kind of thing, which I would associate with grooming, quote unquote, and conditioning. But for the most part, in my situation, there's a lot of torture, literal torture and rape. And I really don't know why they kept trying so hard when I didn't exactly just give up on trying to fight for myself. I mean, I did. I was forced to many times as a kid because I had no alternative. But I'd always go back to trying to fight them. And then they'd always try to find a way to knock me down again. But never did I just turn into this alternate personality that thought all of this is okay and I liked it. I mean, it was more like none of it was ever okay with me, and I hated what they were doing, and I hated some of them. But I was being forced to act like I liked them, and I was also being forced to repress every single instinct and desire that I had to fight them into having an automatic response to protect and defend myself in a situation of rape, where I was being asked and basically forced to do something for someone, for example, a blowjob. When with layers and layers and years of instilled fear that they had planted in me to do what they said, or how many, they spent over a decade torturing me and using death threats to get me to just have an automated response so that I would then see some of their triggers and respond, or their cues to what they wanted me to do, and respond to what they wanted me to do without any kind of protest. Sometimes. I mean, there were other times I did still protest. But what they wanted was an automatic response, no questions asked, and not even allowing me to think about trying to fight them at all. So I explained what they did with, for example, Forrest Tanzer and some other men in, for example, my kitchen in Moses Lake, Washington, stand there with maybe a Bob Garrett and some Irish guy and military person or a cop or someone, and then they would and actually Alvaro Pardo was there. He showed up at some point for he's not the same age as me, and he's older. So the one that I saw, who they were calling Alvaro Pardo, was older. He was showing up for a couple of things and watching them when I was younger. And another one was Kevin Jones from Wenatchee, Washington. He showed up in person and participated in this whole thing. So, I mean, those are just a couple of names. There were a lot of individuals involved. So I explained some of the things that they did, and they'd give a hand signal, and they'd say something that was very specific, and acquire a specific stance, and then expect me to give them a blowjob. And they kind of transitioned from this blowjob for a bottle of milk by, I think, continuing their attempts to basically intimidate me and program me to do this for them while they were then like standing, for example, next to the refrigerator. So there wouldn't be a bottle of milk when I was just a little bit older and not drinking from a bottle anymore, but it would be right next to the refrigerator where they had done some of these things in the past. So it still connected and associated my thinking with this is what they expect. And then later they do it in other areas or locations that were not right next to a refrigerator. So they basically would use certain things and then try to remove the situation and distance themselves and me from the original context. And but all the while making sure that I understood that certain things meant the same thing no matter what changed in the setting. And one of those things that they used as a trigger, I actually remembered because, which I remember more than one time. I mean, it's not like some brand new memory. But I remember this because of a news article, which it wasn't really new news, and Vladimir Putin was saying pretty much the same, making the same comments that he made decades ago. It wasn't a new comment or expression used by him at all, but he said something about like they went to the U.S. or someone wants to chain you and then pull out your teeth and tear out your claws. And that helped me to remember a little bit more about what they were doing in programming me with the forcing me to give blowjobs to men. And part of it is because they would tie me up sometimes, or if I didn't do what they wanted to with the blowjobs, they get out a pair of wrenches, which I've already mentioned, and they'd pull out one of my teeth. And it was usually it was always a baby tooth that would have come out at some time anyway. But sometimes the tooth wasn't loose at all. And actually, they were giving my teeth away to a bunch of cops. Like, cops were taking my baby teeth as trophies. And which is kind of sick, actually. They're like molesting me, and then they were wanting one of my baby teeth as a souvenir. So they were doing that kind of thing to me, and then I remembered with pulling out your tearing out your claws. I think that at some point someone tried to tear off one of my nails. And I almost remember that maybe one of them did tear off a nail, like a toenail or something. Like something, I think one time in my life I got hit with a hammer or something, and it turned my entire toenail blue, and then it got pulled off, and everything grew back normally. I didn't have any permanent damage, but I think that happened once. But in general, they weren't always like trying to tear off my nails, that kind of thing. But what they did, and what that expression reminded me of, is that they would put socks on my hands. And because when I was younger and little, and I would, as a little kid, try to claw at them with my hands, even if I didn't have really long nails, I'd try to poke them in the eye or scratch their face or try to defend myself. And so they started putting socks. They put mittens or socks. Typically, there was not always there weren't always mittens around, so they would grab socks and then tie. Usually, sometimes they used tape, and other times they used rope to fasten these socks to my hands. And I'll explain the rest of it.